Hello, everyone, and welcome to this short tutorial recording on the Bridges model, the Bridges Out of Poverty model overview. My name is Suzie Johnson Smith. I'm excited to spend the next few minutes with you and use and explain a model that I frequently use in our strategic planning here in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. I have been a consultant for about 5 or 6 years now with a hot process, as well as work in health and human services for 30 plus years. So I hope you find this video helpful to help break down the Bridges model and understand each piece and what it takes to apply the Bridges model in your community. So first of all, here is the broader picture of the Bridges Out of Poverty model. And when we think about and look at this, sometimes it feels a little bit overwhelming. And so if we break it down piece by piece, individual, institution, community, and policy, it might help, to deepen the understanding for each of us as we try and work on community issues together. So let's start. First of all, we want to begin with a strong foundation. When we have a strong foundation, the rest of the building doesn't crumble. A strong foundation includes ensuring that all levels of your organization are interested in continuous improvement. From the first point of contact, your boards, your leaders, your middle point contact, everybody within the organization is invested in continuous improvement using the Bridges lens. That we are interested in quality assurance and measuring data and working together collectively to build better relationships, better outcomes, and better community collaboration, and ultimately influence policy. So it's not just coming from leadership. There's a vested interest for community well-being and community issues to work together. That's your strong foundational piece, and it all begins there. So again, what happens when we don't have a strong foundation to something? Then typically it would crumble. So your strong foundation begins the model. And then the first step, which is, the very first piece of the model, and you'll notice that the individual lens has two columns. One is for the resourced individuals and the other is for the under-resourced individuals. So let's talk about the first column. The first block represents the Bridges Out of Poverty workshop for resource service providers. That is the individual lens workshop that helps us to understand ourselves and the folks that we might be working with in the community to start to improve relationships. It introduces, as many of you know, it introduces new tools, new strategies, and most importantly, a really deeper understanding of ourself, our own societal lens, and the societal lens of others. So it adds to your toolbox of creating inclusive agencies and organizations and businesses and communities and networks that can work together to improve relationships with the individuals we serve, whether that's health, human services, workforce development, faith-based, etc. These are strategies for professionals working in the community with vulnerable community members. It starts with that. And because Bridges is all about balancing power and creating socially cohesive societies, we don't want to just train the service providers in this incredibly powerful curriculum. We want to also provide the same curriculum, the same understanding, the same investigation and analyzing of ourselves, our community, and working with others. And that's done for participants who might be receiving services through the Getting Ahead and a Just Getting By World program. And this really balances out the power. So it's equally important to train the service providers as it is to train those who are utilizing services in the community. And again, that creates a common language between the person you're working with and yourself. It balances out the power in a common language, a common understanding of community issues, and Getting Ahead investigators investigate their life, their community, their future story. So for those of you that don't know much about the Getting Ahead and a Getting By World program, it is really about the participatory component of Bridges Out of Poverty. When we think about then moving over to the middle pillar, this is your leadership, your board members, those who are making decisions for those who are providing services. So the first blue pillars was about training service providers and leaders and first point of contact. and then engaging the under-resourced and getting ahead. Equally important is making sure that all levels of the organization are trained in the Bridges Foundation, the Bridges Out of Poverty individual lens, before you can begin the institutional lens. So making sure that all levels of staff within your organization are trained is crucial in order to move to the next, step of building your community well-being model. Then as we move over to the community lens, if you've trained service providers, you've trained those who are receiving services, you've trained your boards and your leaders, you now have a steering committee where you could create a steering committee. And you could select that from people with lived experience, people who are trained in the common language, and people who are making decisions for the service providers and the service recipients. So when we start to come together as community members who are inspired by this Bridges framework to work together for community well-being issues, again, we start to, hear different information and hear from lived experience and come together more collaboratively. So the steering committee is made up of those parties. Now back to the individual lens, once you have evoked this interest in Bridges Out of Poverty and the framework of understanding, there really is no turning back. So once that Bridges Out of Poverty workshop has been introduced to your community, most people are saying, how can I do more? What can I do? Well, certifying a community trainer for your organization, your direct community partners, is really a natural next step to be able to build that critical mass of understanding, to be able to normalize the tools and the strategies that are shared in the Bridges Out of Poverty workshop. So to certify a trainer that can train your staff, your community, your close community partners working with mutual community members is really a natural next step, again, to be able to normalize into this whole quality assurance framework and foundation that you're trying to build. Now, equally important is financial literacy and sort of a next step for getting ahead graduates. Once getting ahead graduates, under-resourced individuals have graduated from getting ahead, and it's a pretty intensive program. They've learned about exploitation. So a natural next step is to provide financial literacy education, awareness, partnership, look at different options of being able to, own some of the, choices around where they go for income tax clinics, for example, what resources are available around financial, improving that financial resource within your community. When we want to help improve quality of life for getting ahead, and with getting ahead graduates and people who are struggling in our community, financial literacy is a really important element to come together and work on, as many of us know. Now, equally important, again, once your entire organization is trained, your board, your leaders are trained, you have a vested interest in quality assurance, the next step is to start looking at the institutional lens, your client life cycle, your policies, your procedures, your case management practices. Do they match the population you're serving? There are so many pieces to this workshop that we look at. Things like your written letters and forms. What set of hidden rules is your agency operating under? What steps does your client or your customer go through to access your services? And where are we collaborating? And where are we building institutional resources to create thriving, healthy organizational cultures? And that's something that we're finding post-COVID and post-pandemic, that most organizations are really interested in trying to figure out how can we come back together and recover from this difficult time in our community. Now, your Inclusive Bridges Steering Committee that includes getting ahead grads, service providers, decision makers, board members, et cetera, within your community, your Bridges Steering Committee starts to look at the future story collectively together. Remember that getting ahead grads have firsthand experience of the impact that poverty has had on them. And so when they start to become a part of the problem solving and creating community future story together and imagining a preferred future story, not only for themselves individually, and not only for the organizations that we work within, but also for our communities together, it starts to lead to that strategic plan for overall poverty reduction. It starts to address some of the common issues that might be happening that we haven't had a common language for, and creates a bit of a strategic direction for the community around community well-being issues. When we come back to the individual lens, We really want to work on attaining critical mass of the resource service providers. And that is done, you'll notice, after the second step of certifying a trainer. While us AHA consultants love to come into communities and provide workshops with you, and help to engage your community members, if you have a certified trainer after days like that, they can work on attaining critical mass, invite other partners that weren't there, build critical mass of understanding to use this common language across your, community partners that you're working with, and most importantly, within your organization. Oftentimes when we have training, we're really inspired by it, but we will default back to our comfort zone and not necessarily try the new strategies or new tools if we don't have someone championing us, encouraging us. And a Bridges certified trainer can do that, can champion, keep it normalized, keep the conversations going to really embed the Bridges out of Poverty framework into your organization. Equally important is staying ahead for our Getting Ahead grads. I often reference Getting Ahead is a Band-Aid for the wound. It's beautiful. It helps to stop the wound. It helps individuals to start to really look at their future story and dream and walk alongside of the service providers. And Staying Ahead is coordinated for the healing. Staying Ahead is coordinated typically, as a gathering of Getting Ahead grads to continue working on their future story, keep the momentum going, continue to work on building those 11 resources. Investigators create a preferred future story upon graduating and as part of the Getting Ahead program. So Staying Ahead is that mechanism, that tool to continue to work on that and to continue to inspire one another and stay engaged. Just like a Bridges Out of Poverty trainer would continue to keep the staff engaged at the organizational level, Staying Ahead is a way to keep each other engaged post-graduation. Once your organization is trained, your partners are being trained, your programs and your policies and your procedures are being revamped to match the population you're serving. You're really collaborating to build resources across the community, not only for the individuals that we serve, but also at the institutional level for healthier agencies that collaborate with one another. We start to think about how can we partner better. We refer really well to one another often in communities. Sometimes what we don't do is collaborate to the extent in which we could. Collaboration of really creating those genuine partnerships to build those resources. So partnerships that look like agencies identifying workforce development agencies, health, human services, faith-based, saying, here's the resources that we help the individuals in the community grow and work on. And then we start to collaborate around those 11 essential resources to provide wraparound supports with individuals who are working towards their future story. And it's all using the Bridges framework. As a community, institutions, if we have identified which of the 11 resources we are helping our under-resourced build, as in the last step, then now we start to be able to come together to plan for growth. It enhances our collaboration across communities. We start to include other sectors, perhaps the business sector, the profitable sector, banks, etc. So the steering committee starts to work on engaging other sectors, planning for growth, thinking about succession planning, addressing the 4 areas of poverty, not just, one area in their community planning or community action planning, using that problem-solving thinking tool that is introduced in the Bridges Out of Poverty workshop. Once you have really worked at all 3 of those pillars, as we've just walked through, when we've successfully applied those steps across the 3 lenses, by building the entire model, one step at a time, we typically have lived experience at the table. We have decision makers at the table. We have service providers at the table. We have some of our community partners at the table that might be in small businesses or, working at, for local profitable businesses, et cetera, and engaged in community well-being. So when we have everybody at the table, or representatives from those sectors at the table, including lived experience, we start to see true collaboration come together. We start to actually look at community well-being. We start to, again, develop a succession plan for leadership development. If you only have one person, initiating the Bridges Out of Poverty model in your community, and you're not thinking of succession planning, then all the work that you're doing will, dissipate when that person leaves, retires, goes to another organization or another community. So we're thinking about how do we keep this momentum going. The Bridges Out of Poverty model really is the marathon, not the sprint. And we build it, one step at a time. And it doesn't have to be linear. It can be little pieces happening across your community, getting ahead, getting up and running, and certifying Bridges trainers, or coming together at the community action tables to use that problem solving thinking tool. But the ultimate goal at the end of it all is firmly understood within organizations, within institutions, with the individuals we serve, with the individuals who are providing the service, and to the broader community, that we're working on community issues together, and that we're starting to plan and look at improved quality of life, this overarching improved quality of life that ultimately starts to influence policy direction. When we start to come together for some of our advocacy around policy, it can be much more effective. And so then you start to actually engage your broader decision makers in some of the policy decisions that are happening, again, for communities, and improving ultimately the quality of life for those that are living in your community. Here's another mental model. It's just helpful to show as another way of how we demonstrate the lenses, the impact, the overall impact on your community and what it can have as you start to come together. And I encourage you, when you're thinking about building the Bridges model, keep in mind those few things. It's the marathon, not the sprint. It balances out power. And when we apply the work at all of the levels, we ultimately start to see improved community well-being and quality of life for our entire community, and help to reduce the social disparities that are happening across our communities. And isn't that what we all want? We're all invested in and want community well-being, safe, healthy, thriving communities. And so when we think about that, the Bridges model can be your answer. I encourage you to use this model and piece it out. It can help you in your strategic plan overall. It can also help you to understand how to build a Bridges community yourself. So thanks for being with us.